Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Negotiations between Theresa May and Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party are still continuing, with both sides confident tonight of a deal sometime tomorrow. The DUP leader, Arlene Foster, has outlined her priorities, among them Brexit and counter-terrorism. Today, the former Conservative Prime Minister John Major joined others who voiced their concerns over the implications of a deal with the DUP. All of which gave Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn some of his best lines in the Commons. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg reports.
They're all here. With new MPs, Parliament returning to its business. The Commons Speaker elected, well, dragged by tradition to his grand chair again. But a government in charge? Not quite yet.
Mr. Speaker-elect, on behalf of the whole House, may I congratulate you on your re-election. At least someone got a landslide.
Theresa May able to laugh about losing seats, but no deal in place yet that will prop her up.
As we face difficult challenges ahead, let us come together in a spirit of national unity to keep our country safe and build a stronger, fairer and more prosperous future for everyone in every part of our United Kingdom.
The Labour leader delighted in throwing the Tories' campaign barbs back at her.
Democracy is a wondrous thing and can throw up some very unexpected results. And I'm sure we all look forward to welcoming the Queen's speech just as soon as the coalition of chaos has been negotiated.
Number 10's hoped-for deal with the Northern Irish Unionists kept Downing Street waiting. Even the resident cats involved in a stealthy power play. The DUP, natural allies with the Tories, seemed to be enjoying their big doorstep moment.
You ready to drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Foster?
Arriving for talks, willing in principle. Would they sign on the dotted line? But time passed, and more time passed. The DUP chose the back door to leave.
After nearly 2 hours of talks, it's the Prime Minister who's first to emerge. There's no sign of the DUP. I've been told the I's have been dotted and the T's have been crossed, but there's no sign of a final deal.
They're not exactly wearing their influence lightly. You can't blame this small party for seeming cock-a-hoop at their newly public power, even though their involvement in government is anathema to some.
If I remember vaguely, I was on the right on Saturday.
We need some more people over to the right.
I think that there's been a lot of commentary around the issues that we're talking about, and it won't surprise anyone that we're talking about matters that pertain, of course, to the nation generally, bringing stability to the UK government in and around issues around Brexit, obviously around counter-terrorism, and then doing what's right for Northern Ireland in respect of economic matters.
But relying on a Northern Irish party for a government pact is a danger, according to one former Tory PM, risking Northern Irish peace and power sharing by appearing to take one side.
I am concerned about the deal, I am wary about it, I am dubious about it, and the danger is that however much any government tries, they will not be seen to be impartial if they're locked into a parliamentary deal at Westminster with one of the Northern Ireland parties.
Yet no deal would be a risk everywhere. Theresa May has few good choices. Chin up, as this card reads, perhaps her only helpful advice. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Downing Street.
So let's have a closer look at how critical the support of the Democratic Unionist Party would be in the House of Commons for Theresa May's government. In last week's general election, the Conservatives fell short of a Commons majority with 318 seats. The DUP, however, well, they enjoyed their best ever general election, winning 10 seats. Together, they have a total of 328 seats, getting Theresa May over the line with a majority of 6. So how's the prospect of that deal going down with unionist and nationalist communities in Northern Ireland? Our correspondent Chris Buckler reports from Belfast.
In East Belfast, people make no secret of their support for the union. In this flag-waving unionist corner of the city, a deal between the DUP and the Conservatives is seen as a chance for stability for the whole of the UK.
To me, personally, I'm British and I want to remain British. I don't class myself as Irish, I class myself as Northern Irish, but not Irish.
Here, people believe Sinn Féin's recent calls for a referendum on a united Ireland are now off the table. And across the political divide here, there is a belief that the DUP can push for money for infrastructure projects, the economy and public services.
It's probably mostly about money. I get more money for Stormont, so more money for the budget, more money for education, things like that there.
And there will inevitably be some price for the DUP support. During the election, Sinn Féin campaigned against both the DUP and the Conservatives. Now they're finding their electoral opponents teaming up. However, even here in Republican West Belfast, there's an acknowledgement that this could mean extra money for Northern Ireland. In the Culturlan, an Irish language and cultural centre, plenty were chatting about politics. Power sharing at Stormont may have collapsed, but they share a desire for any cash from a Westminster agreement to be used wisely.
Education, probably, because we're all training to be teachers. I think that's something that we're passionate about, but obviously then the health service as well.
But they do have some concerns.
What are the DUP going to gain for the money, if you know what I mean? I don't see it as a positive thing for the North.
That's about influence and just having a bit of a say there?
Exactly, yeah.
With the marching season approaching, One Orange Order Lodge has called for the DUP to push hard on the contentious issue of parading. But the Order's Grand Secretary says the DUP's priorities for now should be cash and having a say on Brexit.
This election, I believe, was about country first, and that's the United Kingdom. And I think the DUP are in a position now to assist the United Kingdom to ensure their economic benefits for the whole of the United Kingdom.
The Conservatives and the DUP believe they share a bulldog spirit. But if they've learnt anything in this election, it's that sometimes you need a little help to remain strong and stable. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Belfast.
Well, Theresa May is in Paris this evening to meet French President Emmanuel Macron. We'll speak to our Europe editor, Katya Adler, who's there in a moment. But first, let's speak to Laura Koonsberg on events here in London. Laura, in these negotiations with the DUP, who do you think has got the upper hand?
Well, Theresa May is not the one with the power. The DUP holds the cards because she needs them. Now, the Tories and the DUP have been actually working together behind the scenes informally for the last couple of years. But Theresa May needs them to make a public affirmation. She needs them to sign on the dotted line so that she can show she'll have enough numbers in the Houses of Parliament behind me to be able to run the country effectively. Remember, even if she gets that deal, she'll still be looking at a wafer-thin majority, but she is extremely vulnerable, so she needs them on board to be able to shore her up. Now, the DUP, from their part, they are hard hagglers, they are wheeler dealers, they are no strangers to negotiation. And although I'm told there's no question of the broad principles not being agreed, the deal, as I understand it, is pretty much there. But the DUP will not let this moment, this time in the sun, pass without them being able to make the most of it. However risky this deal looks from other people in Northern Ireland, however many people in Westminster share concerns like Sir John Major's, getting this deal done seems a question not of if, but when. Senior figures on both sides, I'm told, are still talking tonight, even though Theresa May is in France. But further down the road, this could store up significant problems for the Prime Minister, because doing this deal seems politically vital to her now, but it could be very complicated as times proceed.
All right, well, let's go to Katya in Paris. Katya, just listening to Laura, you'd have thought Theresa May had enough problems at home without heading off to Paris.
Absolutely, George, but this visit was planned weeks ago, and at the time Theresa May hoped to sweep in here to the presidential palace. She wanted to dazzle, she wanted to intimidate, and with a strong popular backing won at her snap election and with her plans for a hard Brexit. She arrived just a few moments ago, of course, politically humiliated and on the Brexit back foot. What a huge comparison to the new dynamic EU enthusiastic French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, the meeting itself will be amiable enough. The two leaders want to launch joint counter-terrorism initiatives. They'll be then going to an England-France friendly football match. There'll be a minute's silence out of respect for the victims of the attacks in London, Manchester, and of course here in Paris as well. But there is no chance here of a Brexit charm offensive. Emmanuel Macron has promised to be tough. He hopes out of Brexit to lure jobs and businesses here from the City of London, and being such a fan of the European Union, he wants to show that leaving the EU does not pay, and he's quite keen to make an example of the UK.
OK, Katya Adler in Paris, Laura Kuenssberg in Westminster. Thank you both.
Well, now, the newly elected Commons met for the first time today with all the traditional pomp. Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn faced each other across the dispatch boxes to the sound of Labour cheers for him and a stony Tory silence for her. And with it, the cold, hard reality of political deal-making as Mrs May met the leader of the Democratic Unionists to thrash out a deal to keep her in number 10. Tonight, an agreement is said to be almost finalised, but at what price? Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has this report.
The Democratic Unionist Party MPs on parade at Westminster today. Theresa May's lifeline.
Are we looking at the real government?
They're boasting about their gains for Northern Ireland, but they know they shouldn't push it too far.
Strained laughter at that.
What's your price?
The DUP leadership held talks in number 10. They're expected to see an agreement produced tomorrow, including cash for Northern Ireland infrastructure and public services. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major said it was all risking the Northern Ireland peace process, also risking alienating voters in the rest of the United Kingdom, resentful of a pork barrel deal skewing cash to Northern Ireland.
I am concerned about the deal. I am wary about it. I am dubious about it, both for peace process reasons, but also for other reasons as well. The last thing anybody wishes to see is one or other of the communities so aggrieved that the hard men, who are still there lurking in the corners of the communities, decide that they wish to return to some form of violence.
John Major also waded in on Brexit.
The concept of what we crudely, but it's not a very accurate description, call a hard Brexit, I think that is becoming increasingly unsustainable. The views of those who wish to stay in are going to have to be borne in mind to a much greater extent after this election.
Before the microphones were turned on and as the new House of Commons was about to sit, Jeremy Corbyn was clapped into the chamber by some of the same MPs who used to sit scowling in silence. But the Brexit election didn't return a Commons bursting at the seams with Conservative MPs as planned. After a unanimous vote to re-elect the Speaker, dragged by tradition to the chair, Theresa May was called to speak.
Mr. Speaker-elect. Mr. Speaker-elect. Oh.
The ceremonial mace wasn't in position. She had to start again.
To all those who are new members, you see, you can be in this House for 20 years and still not always know what the protocol is going to be, but there we are. Mr. Speaker-elect, on behalf of the whole House, may I congratulate you on your re-election. At least someone got a landslide.
Both main party leaders then adopted language neither had deployed much in the campaign. Jeremy Corbyn mimicked her script. She became the consensus seeker.
And the test for all of us is whether we choose to reflect divisions or help the country overcome them. So let us choose in this Parliament to conduct ourselves in a manner fitting to this moment, to debate, to disagree, but in doing so we recognise we all want to see a Britain that is stronger, fairer and safe and secure for our children and grandchildren.
I'm sure she will agree with me that democracy is a wondrous thing and can throw up some very unexpected results. And I'm And I'm sure we all look forward to welcoming the Queen's speech just as soon as the coalition of chaos has been negotiated. And, Mr. Speaker, I just let the House know and the rest of the nation know that if that's not possible, the Labour Party stands ready to offer strong and stable leadership in the national interest.
Earlier, the two party leaders, who never got to debate in the election, chatted on the way to the House of Lords. Tory MPs listening to Theresa May last night felt she was signalling an end to austerity, which has left many wondering what that phrase could actually mean.
Well, who knows what they mean by ending austerity? As economists, we normally think austerity is any time when the government deficit is falling. So you're taking more out of the economy in tax than you're giving back in spending this year than last year. I doubt it will end in that sense, but there is scope for slowing down on the spending cuts.
The budget deficit now is less than 3% of GDP. That is not a threat, an immediate threat to economic stability. So if you did let up now, you'd probably be fine for a few years, but you would be building up vulnerability so that if we are hit by another shock in the future, we would have failed to learn the lessons of the past.
Parties were showing off their new additions today, Labour's new Scottish MPs. The Tories' election consolation prize, 13 MPs from Scotland. Hooray! Not enough to counter the losses in England or save them from dependency on the DUP. The future's orange, Ian Paisley Jr. says.
Future's bright.
Yes, future's orange. That's right.
It's certainly not what Theresa May planned.
And Gary joins me now. Gary, a done deal with the DUP?
Pretty much. I think it was almost done pretty much yesterday. Someone close to the whole process said to me, there's just a little feel of the DUP milking this and rather enjoying being in the spotlight. You get the impression that this is very much focused on economic matters, the deal, as far as the DUP are concerned. Awful lot of money is going to find its way into Northern Ireland. I think towns like Ballymena could end up looking like Manhattan if you listen to some of the people who are around all this. One of the other things John Major was saying in that interview was that he thinks this whole thing isn't necessary at all. And actually, who really wants another election? Not even the DUP, given that they're not terribly keen on Jeremy Corbyn. So his advice to the Prime Minister was just to carry on, plough on with a minority government. There's absolutely no sign of her going near that.
And what did we learn of the new relaunched Theresa May?
Well, we saw a little bit today of what some Tory MPs say they saw in the 1922 committee yesterday, which is sort of the humanising of the May bot. And you saw her little touches there. She seemed more relaxed, behaving more like a regular human being when she was in the House of Commons.
Do you think she was therefore living an existence through these two sacked aides?
There you ask a challenging question. The other thing she's trying to do, though, today to put her government, which she hopes, on a solid footing, is a reshuffle, finishing some of the spots there, and a lot of controversy around one of the people she's appointed in particular, Steve Baker, a strident Brexiteer, one of the people who was organising a lot of, sort of, as some would see it, hardline Brexiteers on the Tory backbenches. I think if you're a junior minister in any department, judging by Theresa May's previous conduct, you're not going to get to see a lot of really important papers and really have your hands on the levers. And I think what this tells us is that she's desperate to do a sort of whips reshuffle here, try and minimise the trouble ahead by having some of the potential troublemakers bound inside the tent. I think to that you have to say fat chance.
Gary Gibbon. Well, now joining us is Joe Swinson, re-elected as the Liberal Democrat MP for East Dunbartonshire after having lost her previous seat in 2015. Conservative MP Crispin Blunt, Government Minister under the Coalition until 2012, more recently the Foreign Affairs Committee Chair until last month. He'll be running for a re-election, no doubt. And Michelle Gildernew, Sinn Féin MP for Manor and South Tyrone. Let's just start with you, Crispin Blunt. I mean, are you happy to be hanging about with the DUP?
Well, it's necessary.
But John Major says it isn't.
Well, I can understand why Theresa wants more certainty with a confidence and supply arrangement. That makes sense, so you can then rely on them in the key votes, and you haven't got to negotiate every single time. These people are tough negotiators. It's probably wise to do this negotiation once rather than on a rolling basis.
And you're not queasy about their views?
Well, I'm quite queasy about their social conservatism. Obviously, I wouldn't share that. But of course, that's nothing to do with my constituents, nothing to do with the policies in Great Britain.
It's difficult to divorce the people you're actually hanging about with from their views.
Well, except, of course, their views on those issues are either devolved, or if there was going to be a vote in the House of Commons, subject to a massive Liberal majority in the House of Commons on those issues. So it's actually irrelevant. And there's been quite an energetic exercise by our opponents to try and paint the Conservative Party as somewhere suddenly having got into bed with these views and who acquired them. Finally, I rather suspect the reverse is going to happen. This arrangement is quite likely to, because of the focus now on the DUP, quite likely to be a liberalising influence on them when it becomes clear, just how much society has changed, both in Great Britain and in the Republic of Ireland, and there's no reason why Northern Ireland isn't in the same place.
Well, talking of Liberals, I mean, Gary was saying nobody's going to have an appetite to bring this government down for the moment. At least you want another election like a hole in the head.
Well, I think Brenda, who so famously spoke out at the beginning of this snap general election campaign, there would probably be many people in the country that would agree with Brenda. But, I think when Crispin talks about this DUP deal and, we don't need to worry about their social conservatism, well, all I would say is if there's going to be this deal, if it is nearly done, then I very much hope it's going to be published. It's going to be transparent so that everybody can see exactly what the terms of that are rather than having to take people's word for it.
Michelle Gildenhove, you are now, well, you're here, but you're not here because you don't go there. But you do come here, which is interesting. So we've got Sinn Féin here on the lawn, but not in there. But what role are you going to play?
Well, we're here. We're not on the empty benches in Westminster, and very much of what happens here in London has very little to do with my constituents. The DUP Conservative Alliance has an awful lot to do with it. So, for example, the DUP have blocked marriage equality, they've blocked a Bill of Rights, they've blocked Ac na Gaeilge. We are very concerned about the DUP policies and what that'll mean, or what promises Theresa May is having extracted out of her by Arlene Foster. So we have a huge amount of work to do, especially in regards to Brexit.
Point, can I just ask you whether you think there is any possible legal challenge here on the Treaty of Good Friday? The Good Friday Agreement surely stipulated no British or Irish government could favour in any way any of the Northern Ireland parties. This surely is favouring.
Absolutely, of course it's favouring. The British government are co-guarantors along with the Irish government of the Good Friday Agreement. They cannot be honest brokers, they cannot be neutral if they're in an arrangement. Well, I'm quite sure people are looking at the legal ramifications of all of that.
Would Sinn Féin launch a legal challenge, even if they were challenging something they would never sit to see?
Well, I know we have a lot of work to do here in London, in Brussels, in Dublin and in Belfast. We have got to represent the rights of our constituents. We're very concerned about what this deal could mean for them. If it means that there's a financial package, obviously the executive will have to implement that. It's not up and running because of the attitude of the DUP to respect equality and integrity.
Well, Jo Swinson, you're nodding your head for the Liberal, but would you support a legal challenge if there was a case?
All I'm saying is I think to see what the impact is actually going to be, you actually need to see the deal. You need to see exactly what it is, rather than it just being in closed doors. I mean, when the coalition was negotiated in 2010, it was fully published and everybody could see. And I think these things ought to be transparent if they are going to be done at all.
Blunt, we've got a situation in which the Conservative Party is going to have a relationship with one party in Northern Ireland which they will not enjoy with any other party.
No, that's true, but however, it has to be said that Sinn Féin would make the charge against a Conservative Secretary of State that he was biased anyway, whether or not that there was a deal, because we are a unionist party by outlook.
No, but
and so that charge would exist. Now,
this is a specific point.
But James Brokenshire has duties under the agreements then to exercise as Secretary of State. To a degree, quasi-judicial responsibilities. Our ministers have no problem exercising quasi-judicial responsibilities separate from the political responsibilities they also hold. And of course, since they are going to be overseen in the sense and justiciable, as you kind of making clear that they might be open to legal challenge, I'm pretty certain he will exercise those two roles very carefully and very responsibly, because in the end it's down to the DUP and Sinn Féin to put the devolved government in Northern Ireland back together.
Yes, well, let me ask you all the same question.
If I can just finish the point, how can James Brokenshire be a neutral arbitrator in talks that we have to have this week between Michelle O'Neill and Arlene Foster if his government are in an arrangement here in London? He can't be neutral. He can't be independent.
No, it's the same point. He's then exercising a role under the agreement, under the responsibilities of the agreement, and it's a kind of quasi-judicial role in that sense. And so it'd be different from the political decisions he would be taking as a political player, and indeed as the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland under the current arrangement, has therefore got to be responsible for trying to get the devolved government back together.
Mess that the government is creating, and in fact it should be adopting a much more consensual approach to Brexit, recognising that, you know, Theresa May went for her large majority, she did not get it, the public have not backed her vision of Brexit, and so as William Hague was saying today, it actually should be something the government's doing to reach out across the parties to try to find some consensus where Parliament can come to a view of the best way to take this forward, rather than these kind of deals which create all sorts of friction.
Well, let me ask all three a question. Is there a new song in the air? No general election for at least 2 years until the negotiations are done.
I think it's essential that we get the Brexit negotiations completed. They'll be done under, and should be done under Prime Minister May, and then the Conservative Party will take a view as to whether or not her authority has
let me just ask you this one,
from the general election.
She agreed she'd messed up.
Yeah,
that's not mine.
Yes,
messed up the general election.
And
what's to say she's not going to mess up the negotiations too? I mean, is she perhaps a messer-upper?
A cheap point and unfair. 7 weeks ago, she was the mistress of all she surveyed.
Yeah, but it turns out it was a bit of a fiction.
And she's taken responsibility for the election campaign to the 1922 committee, and we need to see what the landscape is going to look like in 2 years' time once this negotiation is complete.
This is not just about the Conservative Party, actually. This is about the whole country, and it's about all of Parliament. And there does not need to be a general election if we get a much more constructive approach from the government, a bit of humility to recognise, actually, it wasn't just a loss in terms of Theresa May and the Conservative Party, but actually she lost the confidence in the country.
It is extraordinary that she apologised to her own candidates, but she didn't apologise to the nation for the mess-up.
Well, the nation made the choice that it made. I mean, they're entitled to.
She certainly has never apologised. The people in the north of Ireland voted with a clear majority not to leave the EU. Theresa May has completely disregarded that election, and she is dragging us out of the European Union kicking and screaming. So she is a messer-upper. She never once considered the impact a European boundary would have on my constituency or on the people in the northern half of Ireland, both 6 and 24 counties.
Thank you all three very warmly for joining us. Thank you very much. Within the last hour, Jeremy Corbyn has been meeting Labour MPs for the first time since the election, given a rapturous reception from the PLP as he told them Labour was now a government in waiting. Our political correspondent Michael Crick is with me. Michael, I know you're not allowed into these things, but somehow you have some intelligence. I don't know, do they leave the door open or what?
Well, we're not allowed as reporters to eavesdrop, but the noise at times was so great that we couldn't help hearing, round after round.
You couldn't help hearing?
No, and not just me. Round after round of applause, cheering, and occasionally they'd open the door and you could see them all standing up. I mean, what a contrast with the meetings of the PLP for the first 2 years of Corbyn's leadership, where he would be absolutely slaughtered every time and told he had to resign and Labour was going to lose. Tonight there wasn't a single critical voice, or at least I hadn't heard of one when I left about 10 minutes ago. On the contrary, people were getting up and saying that they'd been wrong. The MP for Chester, for instance, Chris Matheson, who held on to his seat at the last election by just 93 votes, had told Corbyn he didn't think we were going to win and that Corbyn was never going to win. Tonight he got up and said he was wrong about Corbyn, and Matheson ended up with a majority of 9,000. The Labour leader announced that 35,000 people have joined the Labour Party since last Thursday. He's keeping the party on a general election footing, he says, and is very shortly going to embark on a tour of the 60 seats that he says Labour now need to win to form a government. So the campaign continues.
Do I sense the whiff of a little job hunting going on here? Are any of these people who defected and said they didn't like Corbyn and wouldn't work for him, are any of them crawling back?
Well, there was a row of arch critics at the back who just kept silent, apparently, but lots of people have been making it clear how they were wrong and making it clear, really, that they would like a job. Well, we've seen them on our television screens, but I think that actually the reshuffle of the shadow cabinet, when it comes in the next few days, may not be as extensive as you might think. He will clearly have to bring in some of his former critics. People like perhaps Hilary Benn or perhaps Chuka-Umunna. There's some talk of Yvette Cooper. But he can't actually make many changes, because to do that he would have to sack friends and people who have been loyal. And one thing he does do, Corbyn, is stand by people who have supported him.
Michael Crick. Well, back to Mrs May's efforts to stay in power, propped up by that deal with the DUP. Joining me now from his Welwyn and Hatfield constituency is the former Conservative Party chairman, Grant Shapps. Grant Shapps, thank you very much for joining us. None of this would have happened under your leadership, right?
You're welcome. Well, who knows? But one thing I do know is that, we took what appeared to be a very substantial poll lead, and something went wrong, disastrously wrong, with that campaign. And I think it's becoming clear that that was the manifesto. But I also think the campaign itself lacked some of the kind of enthusiasm that you saw from perhaps the momentum side. And actually we had a forerunner of that with up to 100,000 people signed up and campaigning around the country and doing the social media in the last election. We saw none of that this time on our side. So we were sort of caught out, perhaps by the shortness of the campaign, but nonetheless certainly caught out in a way which meant that the campaign just went disastrously wrong, as we know.
But I, like you, was at the Tory party conference at the end of last year, and I mean, the party was thrilled with her and right behind her and basking in this poll lead. So was it the Tory faithful that departed, or was it simply the country?
Well, I think it's quite simple. I mean, I pointed out, obviously, the campaigning element that was missing, which I think was activists on the doorstep, which we got going in 2015, and they did all the social media as well. But the other thing, of course, was the manifesto. I think this idea that sort of got a bit of sort of backing today, that it's because people are fed up with austerity. Of course, we're all fed up with austerity, but that doesn't explain how in the election we're 20 points ahead and then end up on the day just a couple of points ahead. No, the reason that this election went badly wrong was the manifesto failed to offer anything to our supporters or indeed the broader country. It literally lacked aspiration. It wasn't just not pro-business, it attacked business. And for anyone out there who wants to sort of get on in life, as it were, it just kind of was a miserable piece of work. And I think that was the problem, and best encapsulated by that long-term care policy which bombed on the doorsteps.
Then we look at what happened in the House of Commons today, where Corbyn got a huge cheer and there were pretty glum faces for Mrs May. Can she turn it round? I mean, can you actually see this whole thing being put together again in a minority government working and surviving perhaps 2, 3, 4, even 5 years?
Well, the one thing I know in politics is never say never, because, 3 weeks ago it was May mania. Today it's Corbyn mania, and probably both are massively exaggerated impacts, and neither are really very real. We are where we are. I've been critical of the campaign and the manifesto, but we are where we are. And actually, clearly right now, what we need to do is get on with the most important thing facing this country, which is Brexit. So do I think it can work? Yes, I do. It's not going to be easy or straightforward, that's clear. But I think we saw at the 1922, the meeting of Conservative backbenchers last night, that there is actually something of a determination amongst the party to get on with it, and a very, very different approach and attitude from the Prime Minister. Actually something I've never seen from her before, which was a human side. She was, I thought, extremely emotional as she took full responsibility and said she got us into the mess and she'd get us out of it. Now, I've not seen Theresa May like that. It was like May uncut. And actually, if she'd been like that on the campaign trail, I think we would have walked the election.
Grant Shapps, thank you very much indeed for joining us.